Imagine pitting history's greatest minds against each other in a battle of ideas. Today, I trained an AI to think like two legendary philosophers, Hobbes and Rousseau, as they go head-to-head on one of humanity's oldest questions. What is the true nature of man? Let the debate begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying that human nature, in its most primitive state, is brutal and chaotic. In my work, Leviathan, I describe the state of nature as a condition where people live without laws or government, where each individual pursues their own interests without restraint. In this state, there is no morality or justice, only constant fear of being attacked or killed by others. Human beings, at their core, are selfish and competitive. Their main motivation is survival, and they'll do whatever it takes to ensure it, even if that means harming others. Life in the state of nature, as I've said before, is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish and short. Without a higher power to impose order, people are locked in a perpetual war of all against all. That's why civilized society is necessary. Only through a social contract, where individuals surrender some of their freedoms to an absolute sovereign, can peace and order be achieved. Human nature as it stands cannot be trusted to govern itself without coercive structures.
Dear Hobbes, while I respect your analysis, I'm afraid you've profoundly misunderstood human nature. In my work, Discourse on the Origin and Basis of Inequality Among Men, I argue that humans, in their natural state, are good and peaceful. It's society, with its institutions and inequalities, that corrupts this innate goodness. In the state of nature, humans live in harmony with their environment and with one another. There's no private property, no excessive ambition, no destructive competition. The natural man is an empathetic being, guided by compassion and the instinct for self-preservation. It's only with the rise of private property and social hierarchies that the struggle for power and wealth begins, leading to inequality and violence. Society, far from being a solution to chaos, is the problem. Laws and governments are tools to perpetuate the oppression of some over others. If we want to reclaim true human nature, we must seek forms of organization that promote equality and freedom, not submission to an absolute ruler.
My dear Rousseau, your romantic view of the state of nature is, with all due respect, naive. You speak of a compassionate and good man, but you ignore the reality of the human condition. Let me ask you this. How do you explain the existence of wars, crimes, and conflicts, even in the most advanced societies? These behaviors aren't products of society. They're rooted in our nature. Humans in their natural state have no morality because they don't need rules. But that doesn't mean they're good. The absence of rules isn't goodness, it's anarchy. Your idea of a natural man full of compassion is a fantasy. History shows us that when given the chance, people act in their own interest, even if it harms others. Furthermore, your critique of private property is misguided. Private property isn't the origin of evil. It's an inevitable consequence of human progress. What really matters is how we organize society to control these natural impulses. A strong, centralized sovereign is the only way to ensure peace and prevent a return to chaos.
Hobbes, your insistence on seeing humans as inherently evil reveals a bias toward distrust. Yes, I admit that in modern societies we see wars and conflicts, but that doesn't prove they're inherent to human nature. On the contrary, it shows how human institutions have distorted our true essence. The natural man has no excessive ambitions or desires to accumulate wealth. It's society, with its materialistic values and emphasis on status, that creates these artificial passions. When we introduce private property, we create divisions among people. Some own land and resources, while others are stripped of them. This generates resentment and conflict. Your proposal of an absolute sovereign is dangerous. Concentrating so much power in one person only perpetuates oppression. Instead, I advocate for a social contract based on the general will, where all citizens participate in decision-making and prioritize the common good over individual interests. Only then can we reclaim some of the lost purity of natural man.
Rousseau, your idealism is admirable, but impractical. The general will you describe is an unattainable utopia. People can't agree because their interests are inherently conflicting. Every individual seeks to maximize their own benefit, and that's something that can't be changed. Moreover, your critique of the absolute sovereign ignores historical reality. Without a strong central authority, societies fragment and fall into chaos. Look at what happens in weak states or periods of anarchy. Violence, looting, injustice. Absolute authority isn't oppression, it's protection. Without it, people devour one another. Finally, your vision of natural man as a peaceful being lacks evidence. Animals, our closest relatives, also compete fiercely for resources. Why would humans be any different? Human nature isn't goodness, it's the survival instinct, and that instinct inevitably leads to conflict.
Hobbes, your pessimism saddens me. Of course, humans can be selfish and violent, but that's not who we are at our core. Empathy and cooperation are also part of our nature. In fact, many anthropological studies support my vision of a more peaceful and cooperative natural man. Regarding the absolute sovereign, I insist that concentrating so much power in one person is a recipe for tyranny. History is full of examples of kings and dictators abusing their authority. Instead, participatory democracy, based on the general will, allows citizens to govern themselves and avoid oppression. I don't deny that modern society has flaws, but that doesn't mean we should resign ourselves to authoritarian rule. We must work to reform our institutions and reclaim some of the purity of natural man. Only then can we live in harmony and freedom.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbes and Mr. Rousseau, for this passionate debate. While your views are diametrically opposed, both offer important reflections on human nature. Hobbes warns us about the dangers of chaos and the need for strong order, while Rousseau invites us to question the social structures that divide us and to strive for a more equal world. Perhaps the truth isn't entirely on one side or the other, but somewhere in between. What's certain is that, as human beings, we have the capacity to both create and destroy, to love and to hate. It's up to us to decide which path to take. Thank you for joining us on this philosophical journey. Until next time.